the Assembly Rules Committee of the Whole to order. This is a special meeting. It's Friday, July 9, 2021. We are noticed from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. Let's go ahead and start with introductions. We'll start with Mr. Perez-Padilla.
Am I introducing myself?
Or just
I'm
say your
sitting
name
here.
for the record.
Okay, Cameron Perez-Padilla.
Do you want Forrest Bar?
Sorry.
Pete Peterson.
Jamie Aller. Eggs Allentown.
Christopher Constance.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Felix Rivera. Dean Gates, Assembly Councilman.
And the clerks.
Desiree Camacho.
And in the back of the room,
Carl Ruskiewicz.
Travis Frist.
Rebecca Metcalf.
and great, thank you. So we have two primary items on the agenda today. The first, discussion regarding Assembly strategic planning, and the second, discussion starting the mayoral appointees and confirmation hearings. I just want to add before we get to these items that now that we're back at 11 members, some of the committee memberships have been adjusted. So I believe those updates have been posted to the website. And if anyone has any questions, or if someone was inadvertently left off the committee, please let me know. And if there's time today, we'll go around and do a round table. I know, Cameron, you've got something you wanted to bring up today. And also just in keeping with our tradition, we'll continue to be informal with these meetings on a first name basis. So we'll go ahead to the first item here, which Felix will be taking us through. And I just want to acknowledge all the work that Felix has done with our efforts with strategic planning and putting together the prior document, and how that has been very helpful as we further establish ourselves as the legislative branch of government. And I'll now turn to Felix.
Thanks, Suzanne. Okay, so first, before I get started, does anyone know what this background is?
Thank you. Hearts thing.
Hell yes.
I know my midterm counterpart. Yes.
That is Kingdom Hearts. It's a video game series that I love dearly. Does anyone know what the name of the organization is called? I bet not. It's called Organization 13. Okay, that's enough for today. I'm gonna move on. So today, I want to thank Suzanne for allowing me to kick off this process in the Rules Committee and lead this part of the agenda. So for the approximately 30 minutes that I have with y'all today, my goal regarding our strategic planning is to remind the body about the process that we agreed on to update our assembly priorities, introduce one additional step in the process, go through a short preliminary exercise, and have an open discussion about the next steps. So as folks may remember, in prior Rules Committee meetings, we had talked about the need to update the Assembly Priorities document, which was developed for the years 2019 to 2021. The basic process that we had agreed on was to use an accordion-style process to provide any updates to the document. So we would start in the Rules Committee, go out to other committees to flesh out ideas, and come back to the Rules Committee and repeat this process until we have an agreed upon document.
Let me pause you for a moment, Felix. We've been joined by Ms. Kennedy. Thanks.
Thanks. So I think this process will still work, but I'd like to introduce the idea of adding a step to get the ball rolling, developing an overarching framework or overarching rubric to judge the efficacy of the ideas we put into our priorities and the policies that come before the body. For the purposes of the presentation today, I'm just gonna stick with calling it a framework, but we can settle on something different in the future. Before I explain what the heck this means, I'd like to thank Chris for coming up with the original concept. Okay, so what does this mean? Right now we have 4 pillar priorities and 1 overarching priority, at least that's the way I've always thought about it. The pillars include homelessness, quality of life, public safety, and economic development. the overarching priority is communications. As has been discussed by both Chris and I and others for some time, I'd like to go ahead and just add on one overarching priority to the list for the purposes of our discussions and strategic planning, and that is equity. So under each of these areas, we have short-term and long-term goals, and we end with accountability measures. The idea of, and for the purposes of this discussion, I just use the word metric, even though I don't think that's really a one-on-one comparison, but accountability measures doesn't really fit in there. This idea of an overarching framework shifts our thinking on its head and puts the accountability measures first. So the framework, once developed, would be a series of actionable and smart statements that inform our short and long-term goals and help us to judge the policies that are put before the body. It would, in theory, allow us to be much more strategic when developing our priorities as an assembly and when we put in time, energy, and resources into policy proposals. So how is this different from what we've done in the past? So under the 2019-2021 Assembly Priorities, also known as the Assembly Strategic Goals and Vision, we developed a variety of laudable goals that we knew were important pieces of tackling each of these issues based on our collective knowledge. An assumption was made that accomplishing these goals would ensure we met the accountability measures, but otherwise there was very little connection between the goals and what we hoped to achieve as outlined in the accountability measures. This change puts a greater emphasis on where we want to go as a starting point and allows everything to flow down from this overarching framework. It should allow the next iteration to be much more user-friendly and a document that we go to back again and again for guidance. Last, this change should make our goals much easier to communicate and for members of the public to follow and hold us to account.
Let me just pause you a second. Felix, we've been joined by Mr. Weddleton.
Thanks. So I want to showcase one example quickly from the Berkowitz administration so everyone can see what I'm talking about more clearly. I didn't make a slide for this, so I'm just going to go old school teacher on y'all. I'm going to use the whiteboard. Millennial speaking, guys. There we go. So I'm going to use homelessness. So the Berkowitz administration, they had a overarching framework for homelessness that they would bring to us every time that they brought a proposal on homelessness. And I think probably some of us were tired of hearing about it in the end. Does anyone off the top of their head remember what that one was? I'm looking at you. So, and I think it was part of the framework, right? So their framework for homelessness was homelessness should be
Rare, brief, and one time.
Yeah, thank you. A rare, brief, and one-time event. So what I want to encourage folks, so I'm going to use this word a little later so you guys know what I mean. So there are some kernels in this statement, right? The kernels are rare, brief, one time. These are all words that and ideas that we can use to judge policies that come before us. I also want to encourage folks to maybe add in a little bit more. You know, if this were me, some other key words that I would use here to judge policies would be, especially around homelessness, would be humane or compassionate. So there are some actionable, time-bound things, one time, brief, ways that you could judge sort of whether something is successful or not. It also is a vision, right? And the administration would bring this vision to us each time that they would present something around homelessness. So I know that there are probably a lot of questions and thoughts based on what has been presented so far, but I just want to go through an exercise before we really delve into a discussion and just looking at my time. We're gonna probably have about 15 minutes or so for discussion, if Suzanne, if you're okay with us using about 30 minutes. So the exercise, I think, is a simple one, and meant to showcase what this could look like and how it could be used. So in the area of, quality of life, where do you think we should be headed? So use specific language, actionable adjectives, and numbers or a placeholder for a number if you don't have a specific number. You can write multiple statements for each area. The statements don't have to tie together. The statement should be as smart as possible, meaning specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And I will say that one of these pieces, the time-bound piece, I think is the least important, as there's already a natural boundary set up, assuming that we stick to a 3-year strategic document like we did the first round. Don't worry about crafting very intelligible statements. What I'm looking for are the kernels, like I said earlier, in your statements that would help to create an overarching framework. There's already plenty of quality embedded language that can be pulled from in the current iteration of the assembly priorities. So let's go ahead and take 5 minutes to come up with statements that's focusing on where we want to go with quality of life in the municipality of Anchorage in the next 3 years. As a forewarning, I will be asking you to read these statements once we are done. Don't worry about being perfect. All I'm going to be doing is just pulling kernels as to show as an example. So I'm going to go ahead and set the timer, and 5 minutes starting now.
And Felix, if you want to plan to go until 10 after, Chris needs about 15 minutes for his part, so we've got some time.
Yeah. So I have these if anyone wants any.
Or I don't know if I grabbed it. Scratch this time. I don't know if you grabbed it.
So I got one of those in my office.
Anybody else?
Okay, that's time. Like I said, don't worry about being perfect. This is just an example. We're not gonna publish this on our website or anything. Okay. So, and sorry for the awkward placement. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and start and just read my rather blasé statement. And then we can go ahead and go around. Just as a forewarning, I'm gonna start with Cameron and then ask for folks around and end with Suzanne. Okay, so my statement reads, quality of life would be greatly improved in 3 years, so a very literal start, by increasing public transit multimodal options that connect Girdwood to Chugiak Eagle River, increase opportunities to thrive and raise families, and connect our community via a robust trail system. So that is my sort of framework and vision statement for quality of life. I'm gonna go ahead and write my kernels in a second. And I will go ahead and ask Cameron to go ahead and read his.
My statement?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see, quality of life in Anchorage would be increased if we ensured that we had adequate jobs, high quality schools, healthcare, transportation, parks and trails, safety, police, fire, services for the most vulnerable members of our population, shelters, food, work programs, ramp-up services, and all things that are necessary for vulnerable populations to be safe and create opportunities, clean streets, arts and culture, music, theater, public art, adequate childcare, pre-K, thriving diversity within our city, language, and opportunities for all to
Ran out of time.
Thrive.
thrive. How's that?
All right, so you were writing for all of 5 minutes. That's great. All right. Okay, who's next? Keep it coming.
Like Cameron, I think I might have misunderstood the assignment. Because I did the same thing. I just sort of listed a variety of things.
There's no misunderstanding.
There's no rules, there's no grades, this is like Reed College, right? Okay, so them shots out of anybody else. Or is that Hampshire? There are 2 schools, I guess. Evergreen, yeah. Okay, I like him. I just listed some things I wanted to see. So first I had it down, which was jobs. And then I had a variety of adjectives to describe the town I wanted to see. Vibrant, innovative, fun, safe, diverse, equitable, affordable, easy to get around, and then small d democratic. So democratic in the sense that people feel like they can participate in their government.
Great, thank you. Who's next?
Okay, well, I had that we increase the quality of life by build economic diversity and continue to create more trail connectivity.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'll go, we have an amazing quality of life, and I think the core is our parks, trails, and mountains. That's what keeps me here. I've been of the thinking for 30-some years. No matter what we do in the rest of the city, as long as those are there, I will stay. And we just need to keep building on that.
Okay,
Feeling safe, economy, including business, housing, education, tourism, and better weather.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last one. Oh, better weather.
I don't
Weather machine, we need a weather machine. Thank you.
know. 72 still.
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I'm not ready. It'll take me a couple hours to be ready. I can think
Or
about
just
this.
novel.
I mean, yeah, anyway. Well, let's see, what all I put down? Quality of life, part of it is the idea of being able to better define quality life. And it would be improved, I think, by providing basic municipal policies and functions that allow all residents to live here safely and pursue their own individual desire for what a high quality of life actually means, without negatively impacting another resident's same pursuit of a high quality life desire.
I have a college paper due. Right.
Give me enough time. I prefer writing than just throwing stuff out there.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, whoever's next.
So I was much more literal. Fund and maintain X number of public restrooms throughout the MOA. Pilot fare pre-transit to increase ridership by blank percentage. Increase affordable housing options by blank percentage.
Who's next?
I'll go. We set the climate for ample housing opportunities. We attract employers, and we improve opportunities for recreation and quality of life activities in the community.
Thanks, who's next?
I'm next, and I thought about it more as just vision, I guess. Attracting young people, attracting and retaining young people and families, and also being a place where people are able to and want to retire. And I'm glad, Cameron, you mentioned pre-K, because I know we had talked about integrating or adding that maybe to a quality of life, and I think that's a really good example. And I also identified improved transportation, walkability, and those kinds of broader goals, not as specific as Nick. Appreciate the tangibility.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so right, as you can tell, there was a lot of repetition and a lot of similarities, and there were also some distinct individual patterns that I saw in that. But you know, as you can see, right, I pulled the kernel from all of your statements, and once we do this for all of the priorities, you can see it'll begin to develop a overarching framework that can hopefully be easily synthesized into short and long-term goals, help to craft policies that get us closer to achieving the vision, and be used to judge policies that come before the body. So in my opinion, using this as a starting point, and really starting with those accountability measures and metrics will make our document, the next iteration of the Assembly priorities, can we go like this? Yeah, thanks. Next iteration of the Assembly priorities, much more user-friendly, tangible, and achievable. So the goal, in my opinion, would be to focus on this work first before we go into accordion mode like I talked about earlier. Or we can do this as the first phase of our accordion work. So you'll see here I have two processes outlined. Once we have a draft overarching framework developed, I'd like to put it forward as a resolution for the full Assembly to consider that formally kicks off this process and allows for robust public engagement from the get-go. So these two timelines have us sort of adopting something in September 14th as okay, we're getting things started, and here is the overarching framework that we are going to start with as we kick off this process, or September 28th if we decide to sort of go through committees and then go to rules. So those are the timelines that I've proposed. So after a resolution gets passed, the one that I'm most excited about is that Suzanne will officially take over this process as chair and complete the rest of the update of our goals and priorities document using the overarching framework as a launching pad. And I would hope that we would have an updated document to approve by year's end or hopefully by first quarter of 2022. Okay, so I think I've done enough talking. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Suzanne to lead the discussion. And just based on what you said, Suzanne, we have about 13 minutes if I had you right left.
Okay,
Thanks.
so we've got Chris in the queue first off.
So, it dawns on me now, after looking back at this document, that this is the Assembly Priorities document. I think, though, it would be wise for us under each of the priorities to identify the departments and the department heads that are kind of doing the work in the municipality underneath what we would call these topic areas, and then kind of incorporate the leadership of those departments into the conversation so that we can really tune into the shared priorities between the two bodies of government so we can really create an achievable process.
Can I respond to that?
Sure, go ahead, Felix.
Thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And I think the first time that we did this, we were sort of doing it on our own, and this was sort of a bit of an adventure because we'd never done something like this before. I totally envision this next round now that we're, I think we've matured more and grown together more as a body. I totally envision us bringing in directors and having a more robust public process, because I think it was you, Crystal, maybe some others who had said, this is great that we're doing all of this, but we didn't really include much of the public process in any of the documentation development the first time around. So yeah, I think there's definitely opportunity for us to engage some of our partners as we develop this next round.
Right, but again, in the concrete document, identify the department heads, and then that way we create a feedback loop between us and the actual implementers of our policies. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Crystal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to get too hung up on this and into the weeds or whatever, but I think what I got caught up on at the very beginning was just the concept of the framework and shifting the metrics with the goals. And what occurred to me was that if we are having to shift those, I was wondering is it because we didn't really have the right goals to begin with? I mean, goals to me need to be the end game, not somewhere in the middle. And metrics just basically help you decide whether or not you got to your goal. But I'm wondering if there's a piece missing in there, like strategies, and if we're confusing a lot of those, if to a certain extent, our goals were actually more strategies and our metrics were maybe more goals. And so maybe rather than switching the framework itself, we switch the content underneath those categories. So anyway, and I don't know how, and I guess my question to you is, how does all of that actually affect our process here in just having these conversations?
Yeah, if I may respond, Suzanne.
Go ahead, Felix.
Thanks. So yeah, I think you bring up a great point, and I think it was part of I don't want to necessarily say weakness, but one of the parts of this first document that I think made it less user-friendly or less tangible for some of us to use, because I think it did exactly what you were saying. I think we didn't have sort of a good jumping off point for us to start. And I think that's primarily what this is meant to do, right? It's meant to give us a good jumping off point. And from there, things may look very similar. I mean, it depends on the process that we take from there. But it also could change the way that we think about our goals and the way that we think about sort of the vision in the end. What are we going to? Where are we going to land? And for me, I felt like changing that up and how we think about the priorities document was really important from the beginning. So I think the weakness that you've expressed is the one that I have felt exists in our current document.
Okay, so you think the items, can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Crystal, and then we'll have
All right,
Cameron
thanks.
next.
So do you think then that just kind of restructuring the framework itself just delivers a better product and gets to what we're trying to get to? Just by changing the structure?
In my opinion, I think it makes it much easier for us to get where we're going to. I think this first version, I think we had a little bit of difficulty sort of envisioning where we are trying to go. So yeah, I think it just makes the whole process much easier.
Thanks.
Thanks. Cameron?
Yeah, so I think the two core purposes for doing this work and for having this document, and there may be more, but the two, for me, the most important things. One is to guide us, right? So what are as we move forward and make decisions and work on things, are there core things that sort of we need to look back on to go, are we staying within what we said, how we were gonna function? What are the sort of the things you were talking about in terms of rare, brief, one time, humane, these sort of ideas that guide us so that we have a bit of a check. We can go back and go, is that how we said we were gonna do our work? Is that how we said we were gonna function? Is those the things that we value? And the other, so there's the guiding part, and then there's the focus part, right? We could work on a million things, and but let's try to work on the most important things. And so coming together and trying to find some agreement on if we're going to really move some really important things forward, we need to do it together. And so by making some decisions about priorities, the likelihood of us making progress on those are higher. So it doesn't mean that we can't work on other things or that things can change, but it gives us an opportunity to focus our energy and have a higher likelihood to actually move some things that are important forward. So that guiding idea where we can look back on it and saying, oh, remember we said these are the things we needed to be thinking about, that piece is important to me. And then the potential of focus, knowing that 11 and soon 12 people going in 12 different directions or 11 different directions doesn't allow us to really accomplish as much as we could if we focused ourselves. So if the result of this could be at least those two things, a guide and a focus, I think would be really helpful for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Cameron. Did anyone else want to speak before we go back to Chris?
Just a quick comment on that.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
On the thought of guiding us, I want to make sure we at least talk about that. It's not just a guide for us, but it's a guide to the administration as well. To channel Dick Cheney, the assembly sets policy for the municipality and the administration administers it. And so we need to have a way that we can share with them as well our priorities. So it guides us and guides them and hopefully serves as a tool for alignment.
Yeah, can I just respond also?
Sure, go ahead, Cameron.
Yeah, I really do think that that's a powerful idea because I think what it does is it communicates clearly to the administration, here are the things that are really important to us, right? And so as they're trying to make the decisions, not only will it help them to hopefully choose things that are in priorities for us, but also as they make their decisions, to your point, they'll look back on it and go, did we do this? Did we do that? Did we think about this? And it will allow them to have clear guidance from us in terms of what our priorities are. So, thanks.
Thanks, Cameron. Meg, and then Crystal?
This jumps further ahead to when we've agreed on what everything is, but as we want to do updates and include what we've done toward these ends, I would love it if we could start referencing ordinances passed or actual legislation or budget items broad, because I think it's really important we talk about policy in kind of a broad framework, but we effectuate that policy through specific actions, and referencing those actions, I think is really important, particularly if we want the administration to use this as a guide for implementation. So we're really clear on our intent. Thanks.
Thanks, Meg. Crystal?
Well, I don't really even know where to start on this, I guess. I guess for me, where the challenge is or the struggle is going to be is that idea of alignment. And, because I represent a very different community than Anchorage. And I know there are nebulous priorities, I guess, if you just say quality of life. Okay, that could be a bazillion different things to somebody and or to a group of people. And so my challenge, I guess, is how do we put that into some kind of a document, that reflects the differences? Because what I'm hearing is that we're all going to align with something and we're going to be able to give this general guidance to the administration. And, my community may or may not be in alignment with that, especially if we're looking at strategies or actual specific goals. So I just kind of throw that out, not having an answer, not really expecting anybody else to have an answer, but certainly open to discussion on that concept. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. And then Jamie, and then Cameron.
Thank you. I'm kind of with Crystal on that. My priorities might be quite a bit different. One of them, as Felix had mentioned, transportation out to Eagle River. That's not a priority. I know my district, and there might be a couple people, but it's absolutely a waste of funds for my district to have that happen. I know that the reason we stopped it mainly was because we didn't have a lot of individuals who wanted to ride the transportation buses back and forth. So there's some things, my priority is not pre-K. And I listen to what my constituents, the majority, want. And so I think that for me, I appreciate the document and the alignment and the priorities, but I'm just gonna be blunt, kind of outnumbered. So my priorities are very different with other districts represented. Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. Cameron?
Yeah, I guess I just want to respond to both of the comments and with two things. One is that, and maybe I'm overly hopeful, let me just put it that way, but I do think there are things that we can find that we are all in alignment on. I think there are things like public safety. And now we can talk about how we do that, but we all want safer communities. We all want healthier communities. We all want high quality schools. I think there are things that we can find. I'm hopeful that we can be in alignment. Now we can be different on how we do that or the path to get there. So that's my first point. The second point is that we are a body. We are a body of individuals, but we act as a body. And so when we act, when we vote, it is the voice of the body. And so that I think that's just something we always have to remember, is that once something is voted on, it is the will of the assembly, period. Whether it was 8 to 3 or whether it was 7 to whatever. So I think that's part of this process, is that it's not easy to find alignment. My community is different from other people's community, and there are things that other people want and have priorities on that don't line up with me. But part of this process is to try to find the alignment where we can, but make sure that all voices within this body are heard, because our constituents deserve that.
Thanks, Cameron. And we're running to the end of our time, I think, here. So I will just add that, we did come up with this document and we did find alignment 2 years ago. And I share Cameron's optimism that we'll continue to find areas where we can work together to move those priorities forward. Felix, did you have anything you wanted to conclude with?
No, I appreciate the discussion, and I think this is the start of the discussion, and I guess for me, the first initial thing that I had on our timeline was basically everyone doing a little bit of homework on their own And as, if you remember 2 years ago, that's sort of how we did it as well. We did homework on our own and then brought it together as the group. So you'll probably be getting an email from Suzanne and or I that will help outline how we want to move forward with that and what that homework might look like.
Great, thank you so much, Felix, for getting us going on this process and for all your prior work on it too. And a quick comment from Jamie?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that I appreciate Cameron's comments, and it's easy to say when you're in the majority.
It is.
It's very easy. Thank you.
If I might, then I would add to that.
Go
That's
ahead,
the
Chris.
work, actually. The work of this process is to get your ideas on the table and for us to hammer it out and figure out a consensus product. And that's what we did that last time. And I think we can do it again. So you're right. It is easy to say, but the work itself is being in the room and hammering it out. Let's do that.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We're gonna go ahead and move on to the next item, discussion regarding mayoral appointees and confirmation hearings. And actually, Chris is going to take us through the process and lay out how we're gonna proceed as we have several confirmation hearings scheduled today. Go ahead, Chris.
So what's being handed out is a proposed process. It's basically outlined, and we're here to take input, and then we'll finalize it shortly after this meeting. The document that you're about to receive includes a brief memo, the list of appointees as submitted to us, the charter sections that govern the appointees and the oaths. So those are the documents that are being handed out now. As soon as we have a final agreement by the body on this process, then we'll post it up on the website so everyone has access to it, public, et cetera. So I'm just gonna walk you through the brief memo. First section, the Assembly intends to provide a fair and timely hearing to all of Mayor Bronson's appointees. Hearings are proposed as required by Charter Sections 135010 and 230095, requiring confirmation of appointed principal executives and department heads who are required to take the oath of office. The exact list of appointees requiring confirmation is being negotiated between the new administration and the Assembly leadership at this time. The administration is required to submit to the clerk a memorandum appointing a principal executive or department head that includes a resume and any other germane information they wish to provide. The administration is requested to have appointee memoranda delivered to the clerk no later than July 23rd to allow proper time to organize and schedule work sessions for each appointee. It's anticipated the confirmation process will conclude August 24th. Timeline. The Assembly received an appointment memorandum from the administration for 5 appointees so far, including the municipal manager, municipal attorney, fire chief, chief financial officer, and human resource director. Work sessions are scheduled today, and the appointments is on the consent agenda for the July 13th regular meeting. All of the initial appointees were included in the same memo. So if a member has concerns about an appointee, the procedure will be to pull the item from the consent agenda, make a motion to bifurcate the appointee or appointees in question, and then address the items separately. The Assembly may approve, reject any appointee, or postpone the decision to a future meeting for further consideration. Subsequently, the Assembly has scheduled the confirmation work session for Chief McCoy for the morning of July 26th with the intent to hear the confirmation as of July 27th meeting. The remaining appointees will be invited to confirmation work sessions each Friday, starting July 30th through August 20th. And the initial plan is for the Assembly to take action on the slate of appointees on August 24th. Each Friday section will be organized in a manner to bring appointees with similar task areas on the same day as much as possible, meaning folks who work in building services and community development will all be on one day, administration individuals in finance another day, et cetera. Generally speaking, each candidate will receive a 30-minute work session to introduce themselves to the community and for Assembly members to ask questions. The Assembly may, at its discretion, opt to extend the time period for additional questions. Members are advised to reach out to the clerk to identify individual appointees who they believe require additional time. The clerk will develop a list of appointees for whom members request additional time, and those individuals will be scheduled for at least a 1-hour hearing on Friday, August 20th. The committee will be asked also today whether or not the body wishes to hold confirmation hearings for individuals who are reappointed to their positions. If yes, the plan is to hold brief 10-minute hearings for those individuals. So that's the framework for our appointment process, confirmation process as drafted. And now the discussion is in order. If there's anything missing, we need to change it, we need to add.
Thank you, Chris. John?
Yeah, I guess a couple of, how many are we talking?
About 25 or 30, the list is included if you
Oh,
look.
that's what I was-
But if you go to the list, we are negotiating because it's difficult to determine. Some of them are actually administrative support to the mayor's office and not actually department heads or heads of agencies. And so, but I think there's only 2 or 3 on the list who won't be included. But if you look at the retained directors, about 12 of them there. And so that we can either choose to have short meetings with or not. And then, but generally speaking, each of the above, but we won't likely be hearing from the chief of staff, legislative affairs, community engagement, or boards and commissions. But it does appear that the rest of them do. But there are questions on a couple of them, like Mr. Thompson in building services, because that does not yet exist if it's going to be a department or if it's going to be a sub-department underneath community development, then it wouldn't require a hearing. So it's a moving target at this time.
Anything else, John? And then we'll go to Felix.
Yeah, so what happens on Tuesday? We've got a list. Do we just ignore that? We're waiting until August?
No, on Tuesday, as I mentioned, there are 5 that we received the memoranda for. They're all included in one, and we're going to hear from them all today. And so what happens on Tuesday is the item is on the consent agenda. If a member has concerns about any one of those members, they can pull the item off of the agenda, the consent agenda, and then the motion would be to bifurcate the items, take the ones you have concerns about off and separate them, and then vote for the rest on the slate. And then we would have a more in-depth hearing, or that person's confirmation could be postponed again to the meeting of August the 24th. So there's more thoughtful time to investigate.
Sure, go ahead, John.
So it's sort of, I am surprised at how many emails we're getting on some of the candidates, which is unusual in my experience. So, I mean, is there another way for the public to, these people want a public hearing on this, they want to be able to speak, we don't have that in our routines.
So in contemplating the process, know that history and practice is not to have a public hearing for confirmation, because these are essentially human resource issues. However, we have implemented a new code section that allows for initial public testimony. And so that section of the agenda is open to any item on the agenda or otherwise. And so those would be the slots that would be the natural place, plus people can have the opportunity to submit their comments in writing.
Thanks, John.
And people though, that early testimony.
Thanks, John. We'll go to Felix and then Forrest.
Thanks, Suzanne. So I guess 3 things. First is, so I didn't hear you, Chris, when you mentioned the folks who would have confirmation hearings for sure. Mentioned the homeless coordinator. Is that what
Yeah, no, as well. Like anyone who does not lead a department or is not what's the exact term, a head of a department.
Yeah.
Those would not be, but again, we are negotiating kind of between the administration right now, which ones do and don't.
Got it. And then second, on John's point, essentially what we're doing is a somewhat public personnel issue that normally wouldn't be public, right? So I would be very opposed for us to setting any of these for a public hearing. If people want to talk about it, they can email us, they can reach out to us, or they can do initial audience participation. But otherwise, I don't think it's appropriate for us to set any of these for public hearing. And then third is, just as a general recap for the body, folks may remember a few years ago, Suzanne and I did an update of the confirmation hearing procedure because it didn't really exist. So I'm assuming that we haven't really received the memorandums for the rest of the positions. So when we receive them is when they'll get on the agenda.
Yes, and if I might, the approach is, and I've asked here for a date-specific receipt of them. It's July the 23rd. I've asked for them to submit to us all the rest of them. And from there, we will schedule the hearings over every Friday until we're going to set them for our own deliberations on the 24th of August. So kind of given them that date, they said that's an acceptable date. I haven't given them the July 23rd date, but that just gives the clerk time to begin the 10-day notice processes and all the things that are required under the code, and for us to determine who goes on what day based on our own analysis.
Good, Felix?
Yeah.
Okay, Forrest and then Meg.
Thank you, Suzanne. So I think there's sort of a kind of a language issue in the way that this is sort of a conceptual and language issue. And then also, I think there's an option I wanted to ask you, Chris, that you didn't mention, but I think is an option for us. So these folks, to me, they're not appointees, they're nominees. They've been appointed to acting positions. Now they're being nominated. And we have the right under code to accept or reject them.
Yes.
There are a lot of positions that aren't, that can be hired, but there are certain positions in code that are established. The legislative branch and executive branch has agreed to this person. And we see at the state level, we see at the federal level all the time. People are not confirmed for a variety of reasons. And so, and it's not just department heads, right? There are also some specific things that we have established in code, like the chief equity officer. I suppose that person is a head, but like there are some other ones I think that we specifically said this has to be both working together. And so I think the other option is, instead of delaying till August 20th, we could also reject the nomination. We could, that day, like on Tuesday night, we could bifurcate, yes, and we could confirm 4 of them, and then we could say this person, we have an up and down vote. If the vote is no, that person is not in that position anymore.
The memo states that.
Okay.
Yeah, and what the memo states here is that the assembly has a number of actions. They can approve, they can reject, or they can delay.
Yeah.
The item, and so that ultimately is here, and that's the policy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there's a language issue about appointee versus, or acting or whatever. They're all appointees until confirmed, and then they are in the position.
So yeah, I think they've been appointed to the acting position. I think they're nominees to the.
Yeah, and I don't know in the code it says nominee anywhere, but it does say, confirmation and appointee, so.
Okay. Does council want to weigh in?
Well, just listening to this, my thought was, I'm not sure I see the word nomination or nominee in the code or charter, but the concept is, it makes sense to use that word. But the way I was thinking of it is, mayor makes an appointment subject to confirmation. So until that confirmation happens, they're acting because they're subject to that process. And I think that's really synonymous with saying they're nominated until they're confirmed. So for me, from a legal perspective, I would use appointed subject to confirmation. But if we're talking to the public or media or all of that, say nomination is synonymous, I think that's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gates.
And I was just going to add, because we only have a few minutes left, is there is some legal negotiation going on around this process. One is the moving target, because until there's a reorg, you don't know who really are the departments. So as Chris mentioned, the second is members of the mayor's office are not subject to confirmation. And there's a number of these in here because you don't really know who they are, what they do yet, like director of legislative affair, community engagement. The homelessness person is part of the mayor's office, not subject to confirmation. And then the final argument that we just brought up last night was retain directors, really whether you have the power to confirm them, whether that power attaches. And the reason why an appointment is defined in the code as filling a vacant position. It doesn't really make sense. Number one, there's a definitional issue, but does it really make sense that someone who's been through 3 administrations is now subject to confirmation by this assembly? So that is being negotiated.
Thank you, Ms. Ennis. And we'll go to Forrest, or actually, Mr.
One quick addition to what Ms. Ennis said is there's also some positions here that are divisions, such as the treasurer. Treasurer, it's a division, not a department. And so that's also not subject to confirmation. Although I think maybe in the past, before reorganization and other administration, it was a department, so things change, like Ms. Ennis said. The reorganization and process, there's a moving toward getting here over some of these.
Thank you, Mr. Gates. And we are down to 3 minutes. Let me just check. Were there any members of the public who were wanting to participate today? Okay. If not, then we'll go back to the queue. I know, Forrest, you had a quick follow-up, and then we've got Meg and Jamie and Crystal.
So a question for council, or this might be actually for Desiree or someone who's more familiar with budget issues. So if they are, for example, significantly increasing the size of the mayor's department so that people are not subject to confirmation, but they're bringing things in the mayor's department, well, how does that work for the rest of 2020? Because we have set the mayor's budget at one thing, we've set the departments at another. So how does that work in terms of funding? And also, I think there's some completely new positions in here. How does that work in terms of funding?
Go ahead, Ms. Ennis.
Most of these are comparable to what in the Berkowitz administration they called special assistants to the mayor. So they're different names. The administration has requested of OMB what's the budget, is there a budget? They don't have people reporting to them. So it's very much like those special assistants, just with new names. But they are checking out the budget part of it, if there's enough budget to go around. There were 4 or 5 special assistants during the Berkowitz administration.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dennis. Okay, did you have another question?
No, I'll just be interested to see like how that will work in terms of we get requests for reappropriation and we'll get those before or after the person is subject to confirmation, if that makes sense.
Okay. Thanks, Forrest. So Meg, Jamie, and then Crystal?
So somewhat similar, I'd like those that are identified that are really holding over the special assistance positions identified as such, so we know that they exist in the budget and they are really in the administration and not really a director of a new department or a new place. You notice the chief housing officer is not on here, so I wanted to raise that one as someone that probably either needs to be discussed. And then overall, I have some concerns about the length of the process. While folks are in an acting position, they're still doing a lot. I don't know if there's a way to pull and expedite an individual under this process. So that's a question, I guess, and it doesn't have to be resolved today, but it's a follow-up, and I could,
Okay.
make a request to the chair if I need to, as one I might want expedited.
Okay, thank you, Meg. Jamie and then Crystal?
Thanks. So I was actually gonna say exactly what Meg is saying. These people are in a position where the quicker that they are able to either not or be, I have built faster so that they can do the role that they need to as directors. The second one is, and kind of counters this part, at the legislature, when you are, am I talking to sorry, I have my hearing aids in, so I can hear myself now.
You can hear yourself.
So in the legislature, when you are appointed, it could go for a year and you're like always wondering. But the other question, the other part of that is, public is allowed to testify, and sometimes we don't always know what's happening with those individuals. And I think it's very important that the public that does have the ability to either put something in writing, put it on record, or to publicly say, I've had this experience. And it's alarming sometimes what comes out, but it's also good that people want to come out and support the person as well. So I would go back to saying that the public should be able to participate in any of the individuals that are appointed from the mayor's office at this point.
I move to
Jamie.
extend this meeting by 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're extended for 5 minutes.
Period. I'm done.
Okay, thanks, Jamie. Crystal?
Thank you. I just want to add on to, or maybe clarify a question leading off of Meg's, and that is in regard to whether or not, because the process is kind of long, can the assembly actually reject or approve a appointment without an actual confirmation hearing? So, okay.
That's right there.
And then, okay, and that's it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Crystal. Chris?
Dee, just one thing, on the question of whether or not the individuals who are already serving, we can have back before us, I would direct everyone to 2.30.095A2, which says when the assembly requests. And so I think that it's maybe not a matter of having them re-swear another oath and be reconfirmed in a hearing, but the assembly requests to have them back as an opportunity to have a discussion about the next 3 years. And so I would offer that as a legal kind of thing to contemplate in the conversation. But that, we didn't really resolve the question, is there a general sense? Do we want to have the appointees back in for a brief conversation, or do we not? That's really an important question to resolve.
Okay, and we've got Forrest and then Jamie.
A quick legal question, and this goes to, I think, what several of my colleagues have said. And I'm not suggesting that the Bronson administration will do this, but just hypothetically, if someone's in an acting position and they don't send us the nomination document, how long can they continue in an acting position? And can we sort of sua sponte, can we on our own have a vote on confirmation or, up or down vote without the administration sending us something asking us to do it?
Well, Dennis?
I can answer the first part. The acting is up to 6 months in
Okay.
our code. The other one is better answered by Mr. Gates.
Mr. Gates?
I don't think I can answer right now. That's something I need to think about.
Okay, thanks. So we'll come back to that. Thank you, Forrest. Jamie?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to where some of them are retained directors. And I've experienced on several that now that the new administration is gone, people have come forward. They feel safer, maybe like a whistleblower type position. They feel safer coming out and speaking in regards to some retained directors that are already here. And I believe that those folks are probably also should be open to being reconfirmed just because of some things that have come to light that are concerning. And that's where I think public testing is very important.
Okay, thank you, Jamie. We're just about at the end of our extended time. Let me check once more if there were any members of the public who wanted to participate. Okay, I don't see anybody. Chris?
The question I would ask everyone, is there anyone with a strong objection to having the reappointees back for another 3-minute or 10-minute conversation? Hearing no strong objection, we're gonna proceed with the assumption that the answer is yes, the legal department can work out the details.
Okay, so we'll get some follow-up information on the questions from legal. And seeing no other members in the queue, this meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene in 5 minutes. Sorry for the delay. We're running a few minutes behind.